कर लेगा ना स्लो मोशन में, ब्रिज हो तो नहीं ना, फ्रेम पे रखना तूने, किसी के पीछे पड़ जाएगा समझ लिया, वो जैसे हाथ लाएगा उतना ही फ्रेम खोलिए उसके हिसाब से।
सुनो मेरी बात, अगर वो वाला करना तो तिलक भैया को वहाँ लगाओ, स्लो मोशन है मेरे कैमरे में, करा दूँगा।
स्लो मोशन नहीं करना हमने,
आवाज़ तो मेरी आ रही है ना।
अरे स्लो मोशन ही चाहिए मेरे को, समझ नहीं
ठीक ठीक
फ्रेम पकड़ना होता है मेरे को, तो ये बनाई वो डांस के भी।
ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है ठीक है।
ये बंद कर इंटरनल वाइज
मेरी आवाज़ इंटरनल नहीं कर रही थी मैंने, वो कर रखी है, कहाँ से इंटरनल है?
आ रही है
यार ये लो
है इंटरनल।
अरे अभी तो मैंने बंद किया है,
माइक लेकर
माइक शू पे कर रखा है ये देखो।
Good evening, everyone. So welcome to the IHD Silver Jubilee Lecture by Ms. Rama Bijapurkar. She's Business Advisor and Independent Director on boards of blue chip, corporate and academic institutions, researcher, author, columnist, and academic. Ms. Rama Bijapurkar is a recognized thought leader on business market strategy and India's consumer economy, as well as a keen commentator on social and cultural change in India. She describes her work as, quote, bringing the people view to business strategy and public policy. Ms. Bijapurkar has been a long-time visiting faculty at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and is a dominant voice in the media on business and policy issues through her writing. She is the author of influential books on consumer India and on customer-based business strategy. Her most recent book is Lilliputland, How Small is Driving India's Mega Consumption Story. It is indeed my honor, ma'am, to invite you to kindly grace the dais. The chairperson of this lecture is Dr. Ajit Ranade. He's a noted economist. He has been a former member of the Board of Management at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. Before joining the institute as the Vice Chancellor, he was the Group Executive President and Chief Economist with Aditya Birla Group. His 32-year career has spanned both academic and corporate assignments. He has taught in universities in India and the US. He has served as a member of several committees of the Reserve Bank of India and as a member of apex committees of national industry bodies such as the Confederation of Industry and the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He was appointed a member of the Economic Task Force for Post-COVID Economic Recovery by the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. Dr. Ranade has many publications in reputed journals and is one of the authors of the recent award-winning book, Rising to the China Challenge. He's also a regular columnist in leading financial newspapers and has numerous columns and on different areas of the economy. I invite Dr. Ranade to kindly grace the dais. So, this is the IHD Silver Jubilee Lecture. As I said earlier, IHD is celebrating 25 years of its founding this year. The Silver Jubilee celebrations commenced on 25th January with a lecture by Hajun Chang. Over the course of 1 year, we have organized 11 lectures, and this one will be the 12th one and the final one. And what a way to finish this entire lecture series. I now invite Dr. Ranade to kindly conduct this lecture. So before we just start, our volunteers are here ready to felicitate our chairperson and the speaker. I request Sharmi and Mandeep to kindly felicitate our speakers and the chairperson. To Ms. Rama Bijapurkar, this does call for a round of applause. These kids have been working very hard. Both of you can please join in for the picture. Being presented with the sapling and the shawl. Thank you so much. And now I request Dr. Ranade to kindly conduct this lecture.
Thank you, Priyanka, and I'm delighted, honored, and privileged to chair this session. And a good friend, old friend, Rama Bijapurkar is our speaker for the day. Priyanka has already formally introduced her, so I'm not going to add, but just to say that I think of her as someone who can speak economics in plain language. She was asking me that how should I put it to the audience? I said, just be yourself. Because she's been, as you know, she's the author of bestseller books. She's known as a sort of a guru in the marketing circles. But she's also been on the faculty of IIM Ahmedabad, and she's herself an alumnus from there. She's been on the boards of several companies, including IIM Ahmedabad as well. So, but at heart, I think an economist like us. So she likes to think in terms of not only her MBA lens, but as an analyst, as an observer, and now lately I learned that you're working with anthropologists. So. And one of our books' title, as you know, is called We Are Like That Only. So this is a typical way of Rama's lingo. So I'm not going to take too much time. I'll request her. So the format is that we will have her make her presentation, and then we will have a Q&A session with the audience. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit. That's what good friends are for, to be nice to you and introduce you well. So thank you for that. Thank you, IHD, for giving me this privilege and this honor to actually do this lecture. My little secret is that I studied physics. I am glad to be an honorary economist because I'm always feel deeply disadvantaged about not being one. And I also really appreciate the opportunity to have time to share thoughts. The employment report I saw yesterday was absolutely excellent. I used to have a boss who said it doesn't matter what people said as long as they remember you said. So I think that it's terrific whatever they say as long as the product is absolutely sensible. So I think we're on to a very good start on that. I will keep my talk relatively short and look forward to a vibrant Q&A. Less because I have answers to your questions, but more because I look forward to learning what you folks are thinking about the issues that I think about from the other side of the table. My world of practice is quite some distance away from the world which most of you inhabit. I advise businesses, I teach marketing and strategy at business schools, and on India Inc.'s boards where I serve, we spend a fair amount of time, though not all of our time, looking at financial and business health metrics like return on capital and earnings per share. But perhaps what our worlds do have in common is that we both study people, their situations, their well-being, the changes, but from very different lenses. So I call my work bringing the people's view, because I think that there is a lot of macro metrics that make a lot of us happy, but when you start looking at what that actually means in terms of people, it doesn't look so great. I battle constantly with the corporate world to say that we may be the 5th largest economy in the world, tracking to number 3, but if you look at per capita incomes, we are well below 100. So I think we need some kind of perspective and balance there. But all the same, I've actually asked myself why you should at all be interested and concerned with the topic I have today, which is about consumption and India's consumer economy. And it's a 360-degree view that I want to give you of India's consumer economy, which, as you know, is also the subject of my latest book. And as I was thinking about what would be of interest to you, I thought that because domestic private consumption is such a large component of the economy, 50 to 60% for us, 60% in 2023, much smaller for China in the high 30s, much larger for USA, about the same, about half for Japan, by way of comparison. But if we believe that the idea of economic progress leads to people's well-being via better qualities of work and life, made possible by a whole virtuous cycle, at least that's the theory as I understand it, of investment and consumption, and investment leading to better jobs so people have more money to consume. You folks know all that better than I do, so I won't say more on that.
But if that is so, and it is, then there is value and benefit in understanding this component of GDP and what makes it tick, and also understanding it from the vantage point of the employment creators or business, particularly big business, so that it is fairly clear how they look at evaluating opportunities and what this mega consumption story should actually lead to. And so that is really what I'm going to talk about. The headline really is just this: India's mega consumption story, which is a large driver of our GDP. It has all the ingredients of being the world's most exciting. It is most watched. It's the most exciting story of the world. But, and there's a big but, it is disappointing. It is disappointing for big businesses, especially multinationals, but also large Indian businesses, because it's not an easy business. It's not an easy story or consumption base to really make money from. It has a very difficult demand structure, which I will talk a little bit about. It's not the demand structure that businesses like. CEOs don't like tying up their bonuses to high volume, low margin businesses, which have a lot of risk. We are a large economy, but with lots and lots of modest income people. As I've told you earlier, when we look at it through the macro lens, we feel very good. When you look at it through the per capita lens, it's not so great. And if you look at, if you look at what makes it even more painful for businesses, it is the fact that it is completely heterogeneous. Can I have my slides come on, please? The fact that it is completely heterogeneous, which really means that the cost of complexity is huge. I mean, if you've ever wondered why modern retailing doesn't take off in, hasn't taken off in India, I don't mean e-commerce, that's a different story, but modern retailing, it's because every 10 kilometers you go, you end up having a completely different demand structure. And the whole promise of retailing is to build scale so that you can buy cheap and sell cheap. So quite simply, our consumer base is a lot of people consuming a little bit each occasionally that adds up to a lot. I often ask multinationals who made the rules that says you're not a real consumer unless you buy big bottles and you buy frequently and you consume per capita 200 units of something. I mean, the sum total of the little sachets and shampoo are actually more than the bottle sales. The margins are better because you can charge more per unit, and the risk is also more. If you get your filling wrong, then you've lost your shirt. So that's a whole different story. But quite simply, with this demand structure, there is a global business models, the economics of global businesses, which have been constructed for a world where, if you look at America, if you look at any, even Europe, not the European Union, but the larger European countries, a lot of them are high on per capita and they are high in terms of total as well. We say we're the 5th largest, but if you look at per capita income of number 4 and number 6, I mean, there's a huge and yawning gap. So in this environment, traditional business economics don't work. And that's really why it is the field for a lot of small companies. A lot of small companies get the business economics right, but unfortunately they don't scale. I call my book Lilliput Land because it's these small people who have together given many a multinational Gulliver a run for its money. And I think we've seen many examples of those. Our consumers also are not, I call them monster consumers. They're monster consumers because they have grown up, if you think about it, from after 1991, we've gone through at least 10, 12 years where the prices of everything went down and the quality of everything went up. That's what they used to. Think about airlines, think about telecom, think about air conditioners, think about durables. As duties kept coming down and as competition kept going up, the prices, and that's what the consumers used to. Then we had Chinese goods, and while there were lots of WhatsApp jokes, all true, my favorite is the one where someone is trying to commit suicide, and it's a WhatsApp joke, and it shows that the stool is broken and the rope is broken, and he couldn't commit suicide, and it says made in China. But in spite of all those jokes, our consumers love Chinese goods because they have provided what it is that that is needed at the price that is needed. And so along came China, spoiled consumers further. Good, I am on the side of the consumer, so and then after that came e-commerce. E-commerce came in, and for the first time in consumers' lives, they could return what they liked, they could buy what they like, return what they like. It's never happened to us before. You could buy 2 units of something sitting in a distant area and not pay a premium for having just a small ticket size premium. So the consumer in India has turned out to be a bit of a monster consumer. The consumer wants high performance at a lower price, and is just not willing to compromise. You give somebody an old generation and they actually throw it back at you. Nobody wants a moped. They'd rather wait and buy a second-hand motorcycle. The general theme of consumer India is to stretch for more rather than settle for less. And I think that is the environment that makes it hard for businesses. And as I said, with heterogeneity, there is a cost of complexity that's built in, and that cost of complexity adds to everything. And so we have this tension that businesses have forever been trying to resolve, which is customers want high performance at affordable prices, and businesses want acceptable profit. A lot of multinationals, as well as large Indian businesses, are not willing to look at the total profit as in small margin into high volume. They want to look at the margin gate itself. And that is the reason why in a country which makes 25 million babies, the baby business of Johnson & Johnson is so small. That's also the reason why, if you look at the top, if you look at the top many companies, they're not as big as going to a $5 trillion economy actually should be. And it is therefore not as simple as saying, big supply will invest in big demand and we will have zillions of jobs. That's not happening. Big supply wants to invest at the top of the pyramid, where the incomes are comfortable. Nobody wants to invest all the way down the line, barring a few. So there is a Jio, there is an HUL, there are a few such companies. But by and large, the mass market of India is an unwanted child for both multinationals and for big businesses. The fact that the rich have got richer over time, particularly with COVID and so on, has made it even easier. I call this mentality, why kiss the frog that will eventually become a prince when you can just stay with kissing the prince? So that's really where we are. Modern manufacturing, as we all know, creates fewer jobs, except in certain sectors. Creates few jobs, because if you look at 10,000 crores in auto, it gets you barely a handful. The great IT sector barely scratches the surface. 4.5 million, 5.5 million. If you add everything that surrounds and supports the business, you may go to 6 or 7, but it's still very small. And so we need to see the structure of supply in order to see what is happening, given the structure of demand, and what the future is likely to be. The short answer for me is that I see us more and more going towards what was discussed in the previous panels. So clearly the social researchers are ahead of business in terms of where the activism lies. But I see it going more and more into platforms and marketplaces which aggregate the small, and where the power goes is really left to be seen, and who regulates whom is also left to be seen. So my today's talk is in 3 parts, and Ajit, I will finish well on time. So please give me a heads up if I'm taking too long. The one part is the structure of the consumer base and the structure of demand that has, and what challenges it poses for business. If I thought about my talk a little more, I gave the title first and thought about it later, truth be told. I should have called it The View from the Other Side. And I call it the valuable ugly duckling because everybody thinks the ugly duckling will become the beautiful swan, but actually it just becomes a really nice, valuable ugly duckling with things that we need to worry about. So it's structure of demand and what challenges it poses. The behavior of consumers, we've talked a little bit about the monster consumers. I won't spend too much time around that. The only other thing I will in fact finish this section first on behavior of consumers is that our consumer base is the most consumption-friendly consumer base we ever have. We're dying to consume. There is a huge public cost, private cost of the absence of public goods. If you look at where a lot of our money goes, it goes into conveyance, it goes into communication. It goes into productivity tools, because if you have a two-wheeler, then you actually have a wider footprint of activity. It goes into a lot of utilitarian consumption that helps make life that much better. Think about it, we're buying water, we're buying electricity, we're buying inverters, we're actually spending a lot of money, and we're spending on education and we're spending on healthcare. I often get asked, do Indians not value brands? And I say, of course they do, but we want to send our children, if we're rich, to Harvard, if we're not so rich, to a good university. That's the brands we value more than an Hermes bag or something else. So the behavior also of consumers, that is the good news in the middle of all this monster consumers, is how digitally friendly they are. So consumption is our new god. We've added it to the pantheon. I live on a stretch in Bombay where there is a dargah, there is a temple, and there is a shopping center. And you can see that the temple of shopping has as much crowds on Navratri and Diwali as the temple of the Hindus and the temple of the Muslims during Eid. So, but we also love digital stuff. So whenever I'm asked, is India ready, are consumers in India ready for digital? I say that the day our temples went online, everything has gone online. You can go to Kedarnath and you can do your Dakshina via Paytm. Paytm is not a very good word at the moment. It'll get substituted by something else, but that's what you do. During COVID, you needed an OTP to get into the Mahalakshmi Mandir where I live. You can stream any darshan online for any mandir at any point in time, and we are completely all set. The other thing that consumers tell us often is that when you use a digital method, it is status-blind access and status-blind service. So if my maid and I order gas cylinders at the same time using the IVR, I cannot fiddle it to get it ahead of her. I think the COVID vaccinations was a really good example of how, I do know, my daughter tells me you shouldn't be making all these statements publicly, but still, I do know some people who got vaccinations a little ahead of time. But there is no way on earth you can get that certificate in order to be able to travel abroad. So I think the status-blind service is really what makes people say that ATMs don't care, or bank transfers don't care whether I wear a dhoti or a pajama kurta or wear denim jeans. But the teller cares, and that is really where it is. Amazon doesn't care how little you buy, but if you go into a shop, they do. So that's our consumer behavior environment. And while we spend a lot of time obsessing over the behavior piece is a nice set piece. The behavior piece is the good piece. And the behavior piece also is getting worse because elsewhere in the world, high touch went out and high tech came in. But today, for us, high touch and high tech go simultaneously. So our consumers say, if you work around banks, you see it particularly, recognize me on the phone from my registered mobile number, recognize me on my internet banking, recognize me when I walk into a bank branch, and that's really the high touch and the high tech that we're looking at. So you can now understand how dukhi a lot of businesses are, because there is a lot of demand, but it's very, very challenging. And finally, there is the whole supply side of things, and how is that responding? The future of that is, I think, what we will talk about. So first, let me look at structure. I have a lot of numbers because I also thought it would give me a little more credibility, but we don't have to go through all my slides. Firstly, I usually do this for business because we like to believe we're richer than we actually are. And when people say that my target group is regular salaried people with graduate and above degree who earn, 12 lakhs a month or more, and that's the only people I will sell to, and I hear it in boardroom after boardroom after boardroom. The question arises, that's like 2% or 3% or 5%. If you look at, and why would you not deal with the rest of them? So if you look at the last two columns here, it's easy to see that businesses are saying, hey, I have a 1.09 should be the number. I have a over $1 trillion economy of people who are well off and who earn a little more. It's not, even they are not super rich. They're little more than the poverty line of America, whichever way you look at it. And then I have all these other people who are, as small as Thailand with less per capita income, and why should I really go after them? That's really the question that's often asked. And that's an answer to why not so much investment. Also, if you look at all this data comes from a think tank that I had set up with a friend that I'm no longer associated with on my way now to Vanaprastha. But this is really telling you over a period of time, looking at NCAR data and looking at data from this data set called ICE 360, we find that the top quintile, the top 20%, I call them the T20, they're really the ones that fit our definition of what a middle class should be. You know, the definition we have in our heads in business most certainly. So, and this T20 has been gaining more and more traction, and this T20 is where all the action is. What is interesting is that even though this is the core of the consumer base we serve, we're already running out of capacity. We're running out of airport spaces, the rich are underserved, the not so rich are underserved, we're running out of everything. If you want to go to a restaurant in any big city, you have 2 shifts because you either have to eat at 7 or you have to eat at 10, you have no parking spaces. So that's really where a lot of the action is. What will happen when you start serving the rest of the consumer base is really a good question. And I think this is also the answer in terms of why there is very little investment in the mass market. What this chart tells you is that if you take the richest quintile, post-COVID, I also in my book have looked at pre-COVID to say how good can it get. And in the glory years of I think 2004 to 13 when we grew gangbusters, it was better, but not a whole lot better. So about half of India's income, a little less expenditure because the rich save, the poor don't, and most of the surplus income lies with the top 40% of the country. That is the core target group, and people say, let's look at the next billion, let's look at the next level. I had a wealth management firm that said, can you tell me the profile of quintile 4? And basically, there is very little action below that because the surplus incomes are not there. This chart may be a little hard to read, I'm not sure, but the point I'm making here is that there is a geographic spread. In addition to fewer people who have the money that business would like them to have, unlike China, they're not neatly packed into corridors, they exist everywhere. So companies like LG will go and take a fine-tooth comb and find out where these people are, and this whole tier 2, tier 1 cities, when you have smaller airports, when you have better connectivity, you find that the top 20 or 40% of people are everywhere. 23% of, so there is also a phenomenon called developed rural that we call developed rural, which is basically the rural that is adjacent to the big cities. So this destroys the myth that it is metros. It is not metros. In fact, this is India's number trick. If you take the underdeveloped or the census towns, the sum total of the census towns and the rest of urban and so on actually have a fairly, the columns have shifted, my apologies for that, but they actually produce a fair amount of income and expenditure. We track gold at the IIM Ahmedabad Gold Policy Center, and people say, well, how come poor people are buying gold? But it's just a lot of people buying a little bit of gold each, once in a while, that adds up to a lot. So by geography, if you look at the last column, which is population share to income share, yeah, the metros are doing a little better, but at the end of the day, the metros don't have so many households and they don't have such a large share of income that you can forget about the rest of the world. In fact, if you look at rural India's consumption as compared to urban, the share of households, the share of income, the share of expenditure, the share of surplus income, it's also very clear that if you don't service rural India, you don't service half of India's economy and consumption. It's interesting that the Consumer Confidence Index that gets put out officially doesn't really have a lot of rural. So it is, you know, a little bit not looking at where the consumption actually is. Now, while this is maybe good news, if you look at it from the point of view of a business, it is a long tail. It's a long tail of where the money and the demand actually is. Sum total, yes, business is spoiled. Yes, it's making money quite easily without serving anybody other than the top 20 to 40%. If you look at the richest 20%, they're half urban and half rural. So when people say rural markets are going gangbusters, it's not like the rural poor have suddenly woken up and started buying. It is that a large proportion of the poor live in rural India, and about half of the rich also live in rural India. So that's, I call it the pain and the gain. It's the good and bad news. What this chart tells you is quite interesting. What I've done is looked at incomes in rural households, incomes in urban households, and I said, are they similar? Because now connectivity is similar, the programs you watch are similar, your access to a lot of stuff is similar. Every time you do surveys in rural, some woman or the other fires you and says, do you think I'm a villager? They say to me, why are you asking me questions like this? So clearly, there are several mass markets at the lower end, which are large numbers of households, which have similar incomes and similar characteristics. But this large mass market is not being targeted by most people who have the ability to target scale of this kind. And the reason for that is quite simply the cost of complexity and the high volume, low margin businesses. I will skip this maybe a little bit in the interest of time. It basically says, you know what our occupations are like. But what this chart is really telling you is that in marketing, we have two ways of looking at categorizing consumers. One is the consumer classification system based on how many durables you own. Now, if you look at that, you find that it's a nice diamond shape. There are lots of people in the middle. Everybody owns 9 out of 11 durables. And so that's the bit that in business we care about. However, as this system is discriminating less and less for certain categories, there's an alternate system we've been looking at, which is occupation of the chief wage earner and education of the highest educated male and female. If you start looking at these two metrics, you find that India is back to a very, very, very pyramidal structure with a very narrow steeple at the top. But as far as business is concerned, as they say, it doesn't matter whether it's a black cat or a white cat as long as it consumes. The slides I didn't show you that occupation and education, even in the richest 20%, is far from what we would like it to be. And that is the nature of the beast. So in all this, then, where is this famous middle class? I've actually been quite tired of people saying that between income X and income Y is this large yawning middle class, and the income X and Y is 10 times off apart from each other. So we started looking at, do you have a surplus income to total income ratio? Pre-COVID is a good time to look at it. What is the change as a result of, because if you're middle class, you should be resilient, you should have surplus income, you should have some kind of social mobility, you should have a predictable source of income, you should have a steady job, you should have some skills, and that qualifies you to be the middle class that all the social scientists write about, that we in business don't think too much about. And I've tried to plot this for every decile, and all this is in my book as well. And by this logic, if you look at surplus income to total income ratio, only the top 20% qualify. If you look at change in absolute surplus income, sorry, the second green shouldn't be there. It's only the top 20% again. If you look at resilience, it's really not there for, the incomes have dropped, but everywhere else they've collapsed. If you look at contribution to all India household surplus, it's really the top 20%. So the richest 20% actually qualify to be the middle class that we really have. And so the hyping of the middle class numbers and the hope that it's going to drive lots of investment is something we really need to think about. Even if you look at the middle class, and I'm sure you have, I know that there are people in the audience who put out this data that we all ride on, some of it. But if you look at occupation as well, and I'm obsessed with occupation because we don't have, certainly business doesn't look at occupation as a segmenting variable. But if you're selling insurance and you're in a country full of self-employed people, it should be a bigger opportunity because if you don't show up at work, you don't eat. But we still want to target the salaried people because that's where we think the money actually lies. So this is again telling you that the total regular salaried households, even though a lot of private salaried is what they call service, is not always guaranteed, is a little bit dodgy, is small. And then you have all the other categories of employment. So in terms of genuine middle class as well, we're really talking about the top two slabs in terms of occupation. If you look at it in terms of education, that, do you have what it takes in order to be able to have the skills that you take? It's again a very small number. So whichever way we look at it, we find that the top 20% of India's consumer base is the consumer base that is interesting marketers, is interesting businesses. And the pain of serving this consumer base is still quite significant. And therefore, to assume that a lot of them want to go out and build mass markets, India Inc. runs either with greed or with fear. Right now, there is no fear, and the greed has been satiated because there is a lot. And greed is in a good word, not in a bad word, where I stand. So that's the structure story, and that's the behavior story. So how does supply then respond to this? How supply responds to it is, as I said, other than the top 20%, multinationals actually don't even want the top 20%. Why? Because a lot of multinationals are looking at extension markets for assets they already have, R&D assets, products, business models, ideas, and anything additional they get from here is still good enough for them. So if, and I often ask multinationals that, are you going to transplant? Some are ready to translate, a little bit at the margins, we'll do something, but very few are really willing to do a made for India strategy. So it is often India as a market for an existing strategy rather than a strategy for the market that India is. And that explains also why so many multinationals come and go and why so many multinational CEO heads get sacked so regularly. But that's really where it is. What is interesting is a whole lot of small Indian companies. So Honeywell will spend a lot of time trying to get this mega system going in order to keep our big condos and flats safe. But MyGate comes along at a fraction of the cost using SMS interfaces meant for watchmen who can barely speak the language, and they manage to pull it off. And there are scores of these examples. There's something called Salesforce.com, which is like this really, really big efficiency company in the US. And here we have a small company who's actually tailor-made it for the retail environment we have and is giving them a run for their money. But the fact remains that the big bucks in terms of supply are not really coming. What about Indian companies? Before I come to this, I'll come back to what about Indian companies? What's wrong with them? If you remember, there was a period of time when a lot of Indian companies went overseas. Tata Motors went overseas, Godrej went overseas, a lot of other companies went overseas. They leveraged Indian balance sheets to buy assets abroad. And then when you started being unable to pay back when exchange rates turned and so on and so forth, you found a lot of them actually retreated back. So Indian companies are now saying, I make enough money in India, so they lost a lot of valuable time saying, I will earn in dollars, why do I want to earn in small pittance rupee margins? Which is fair enough if you look at the creatures that they are and where they come from. They've also said that, now they're saying that the Indian market is looking interesting, but the creamy layer is getting thicker and creamier, so why don't we just continue to serve the top end? And even the top end is so underserved. Top-end astrologers, tarot card readers, Roro, Roro is this great thing that you take to go to Alibag in Bombay. And so the Taj hotels will deliver food to you on the Roro. It's just that you can't get enough Roro seats. So we neither serve the top end nor do we serve the bottom end, but there's plenty to be done there. Again, if you drop price, demand goes up. That's simple. I mean, a watchman will say to you कि अगर 6 महीने पहले बोलोगे तो कितना पैसा लगता है to fly to Varanasi? Because to him, he wants to give up a part, doesn't want to give up a part of his holiday. And if Indigo makes it possible with the algorithm, then they're willing to fly. So he has no religion about, I don't want to fly, I'm not the right target group. It just is, what price points are we going to do it at? And every time someone does it at a lower price point, then they lose enough money, and then they start going up. So today, if you look at telecom, I mean, that is the central nervous system of this country. It's a road network in America, it's telecom here. Today, if you tell even your staff that, why don't you use my Wi-Fi? They're like, no problem, I've got my own data. The study we did found that a lot of the data consumption was actually watchmen and, who worked outside the house. Why? Because they have no access to Wi-Fi, they're bored out of their skulls, and they have a lot of content that they can watch. I mean, what else do you do all the time? So wherever you are dropping price thresholds, that works much better, obviously, in the shorter term, provided you have a cost position that helps you make money. And it is this little dance of price, performance, and profit that we've been really struggling with. Now, at last, we've learned from digital business models that have come to us from, inspired by what has happened in the US and so on. We finally have the keys to unlock the mass market, that price, performance, profit. And I think that will be a big driver of future supply. And you really have a lot of small people who are coming together via mega platforms, and I see that as the future of business. How does this work? The customer wants price performance, no small ticket penalty. If I'm buying 1 rupee of gold, if I'm buying 1,000 rupees of gold, you can't have a penalty on small ticket. Go to PhonePe and buy gold. On that 1 rupee gold, you will get the same price as you will get at my jewelers. They want affordable access to high value durables. Once in a while, जब फैमिली को शादी के लिए लेके जाना है, गाड़ी में जाना है, या टैक्सी में जाएंगे, या you can share a part of the Uber. Similarly, tractor rentals. Nowadays, very few people in the lower income groups, you will see wonderful videos of wedding invitations. You know, it's free, it's cheap, you don't print it, and the creativity is quite astonishing. And then they're going and renting. You can rent any amount of lehengas, which makes sense. I mean, even at the upper income, people are saying, why do I buy 1.5 lakh of rupees spend when I don't need to? So there's affordable, there's sachayization of high value durables, which is the Uberization of everything. On the supply side, we want cost and margins, you want a positive margin even on a small ticket, and you want a large market with a comfortable margin. And the magic bullets that we now have from the digital business models, one, you crash operating costs with digital. So if you think about KYC, now it costs you virtually nothing. You e-KYC it. If you look at serving rural banks, I mean, nobody's setting up rural bank branches. RBI continues to say X rural branches for Y urban branches, but no one's actually setting up those branches. It works with banking correspondence. And in every business, what India Inc. has learned very well to do is to strip cost out using digital methods. Even when you have the chap who's coming to service your air conditioner, he doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge, but he has a phone and he's standing on a stool in your living room for 2 hours talking to somebody at the back end and saying, I'll tell you, tell me how to fix this. So one way or another, good, bad, and different, we've crashed operating costs. You're also aggregating users. So when you aggregate a lot of small users, if you look at Oyo Rooms, if you look at Urban Company, you're aggregating small suppliers. You're also aggregating small users if you look at Meesho and Share Deal and all these guys. You know, it's what my grandmother used to do. She would take 4 friends, go to Monda Market in Hyderabad, buy stuff in bulk and come back, and she would break bulk. They'd do an auto rickshaw. Now you have an app that does it for you, and you have a system that does it for you, and it's very exciting. So you're aggregating users, you're aggregating suppliers. Swiggy is aggregating all kinds of small suppliers. Cloud kitchens do even better. You're enabling sharing of high-value goods, and you're digitalizing processes. And this combination is actually allowing you to do the price, performance, profit combination. There's not yet a path to profitability, but I believe that now that we've found the way, you will have a path to profitability at some point, provided, and that's the next debate that we're having, that is it values or is it valuation, and at some point are the two going to get together? And that's really where we are. But I think there is no doubt that that's really where the future is going to be. If you look at Oyo, they have aggregated all the small hotels who on their own can't really have a footprint and survive. They have yoked them digitally, and they've sort of created opportunities which big hotels can't do and small hotels by themselves can't do. They've aggregated supply, they've enabled sharing, they've digitalized processes. Another one that became a unicorn called Dehat, and I'm aware of the Byju's phenomenon, and I think we have to sort out greed, fear, values, valuation. But I think the model exists, where what they're doing is using the micro retailers who are already existing, and they're aggregating users, they're aggregating suppliers, and they're digitalizing processes and saying, let's use the system and let's do stuff with it. I've talked a little bit about Aadhaar-enabled payment system and rural banking. I heard the flip side of urban company at this other panel I went to, where they were talking about the zulum of the platform, and the platform being the new zamindar, and the zamindari that comes with it. I've also seen anthropology, a paper by an anthropologist called Julian Kaler, where he talks about how, and we teach a case study as well in IIM Ahmedabad of the urban company, where if you're an own account worker attached to a platform, you actually have your stature, your confidence, your body language actually goes up. There's a quote from this lady who says that she used to give massages, and the watchman would be lewd at the place and say, "Meri bari kab aayegi?" And now she tells them, "Himmat hai to app pe jao aur dekh lo." So there is something happening there. Now, again, if you look at urban company, the demand is there. We want people who will come do their jobs quietly, not argue with you and get it done. But the supply side, to organize these many people, to keep them going, to keep them in order, is not scaling up just as fast. So we found the keys, but we have to start figuring out how best to use them. And I've looked at 108 unicorns. Some have fallen off and gone into disrepute. 54 soonicorns, soon to be unicorns. And through this process of aggregating users, aggregating suppliers, enabling sharing, and crashing costs through digitalized processes, you can actually see new behemoths emerging. The marketplace is really Crawford Market on the net, right? It is, you take your Crawford Market, you take whatever your local markets are, you put it on the net, and you're saying this is a marketplace which used to be a mall, and you have people who are willing to give you certain kinds of services and certain kinds of guarantees depending on the model that you use. And that's where all the small guys are going, buyers and suppliers. So I think the new face of supply is going to be digitally powered marketplaces and platforms. You already have it for construction. You already have it for XYZ. It is more small suppliers with easy market access are going to finally have access. We're seeing it go completely hyper-local, and we're seeing full-service platform solutions emerging. Now, it is in this environment that the job creation is going to have to happen, unless at some point in time, big businesses find religion and say that they're going to serve the mass market. But I'm asked again and again and again, as my business advisor, tell me, should I serve the mass market? My answer to them is mass markets like time and tide won't wait for you. So if you wait for the consumer to have an income above which consumption can take off, forget it. This new phase of competition is going to come and is going to basically eat your lunch. But that's really where we are on the supply side as far as supply responses are concerned. So that's why I think Lilliput land in the sense that it is small users, small consumers. I don't see this changing. Over time, I'm seeing small suppliers get more and more sophisticated, more and more agile. Even if you think of something as simple as food, I think there is more food excitement on the streets than there is in big companies. And that's really where the nimbleness and the excitement actually is. And if you have VFast that can do local couriering, and if you're a home cook, then I would rather have home-cooked food in somebody's kitchen than something made in somebody else's factory. So in many ways, again, our consumers have leapfrogged, and they've gone from made in my kitchen to made in somebody else's kitchen via VFast. And I think that we are sort of, I wouldn't say stuck, but I would say that small is definitely a major part of where the employment is going to be. And what patterns are going to emerge from it, we still don't understand. But that they're here to stay is fairly clear. So with that, thank you very much for listening to my view of the world. And I'm happy to take... Sorry, can you switch this off?
Check.
Thank you very much, Rama. Thank you. So, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we will have a discussion now on the presentation or any ideas that came out. But I'll use my privilege as the session moderator and chair to ask the first question. So the sense I'm getting, of course, I'm aware of your other work as well, and really, your contribution or your main work has been to provide insights into the minds of the consumer, and consumer behavior has been a big part of what you do in research. But today you also told us there's a lot of action going on, not just the consumer side, but the supplier side. And I got a sense that, pardon me for saying it, but about 20 years ago, we had C.K. Prahlad, who talked about, or maybe more than 20 years ago, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. That was the theme. And what he was trying to say is that don't only look at this bottom of the pyramid as consumers, but actually there's value creation and so on. So is this, just to put it crudely, is it Prahlad 2.0?
I wouldn't presume, your teacher and mine. It is not Prahlad 2.0. It is Uberization of India. It is, I think that's where the inspiration comes from. And I think Prahlad was saying that there is, and it is true that there is fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, but nobody could get their hands on it. Now we have a way to get our hands on it, which is why there's like so much action in the startup space. So yeah, I think it is taking models from overseas and beating them at their game. That's what we're doing and doing very well, because the techies are actually quite extraordinary at this.
So yeah, I could see that the platform economics is a very big part of the transformation that you are foreseeing. And there's a whole literature, a whole new field in economics which talks about the platform economy and how they aggregate, you're saying they aggregate people on both sides, on the supply side and the demand side. I want, please, we can start the discussion, but one more question is, we've had a session, several sessions in this conference, and in fact in the journal, Labor Economics Journal, and among the community, that there is a concern that India's growth actually is not inclusive. I mean, we don't want to start a new debate, we want to stick to Rama's presentation, but there is definitely a concern that if India's growth was really inclusive, we are a fast-growing economy, but in per capita terms, we are still stuck at a low rank. Whereas another large economy like China, where we began almost at the same level in 30 years ago, China's per capita income is now far ahead. So whereas your story seems to say that actually the consumer economy and across all classes of consumers is pretty dynamic and growing vigorously. So why are we not seeing its manifestation in inclusive growth? Or are you saying, or would you say that the data is wrong and actually the growth is much more inclusive than what? So is it really inclusive?
I don't know what you mean by inclusive exactly. I mean, I did write in the paper yesterday, and shoot me for it, that why are we surprised with inequality? I mean, you suddenly, as you move from socialism to capitalism, and you have most people who have no skills and no education, and then you're surprised that those with skills and education are seizing the day more than anybody else. So that's one part of the question. I'm saying that how can you have a shot at the opportunity if you don't have, you've seen the income, you've seen the occupation statistics. I mean, in spite of occupation, in spite of education, there is so much consumption, which is damn lucky that digital literacy has taken over from the rest of it. And I think that the vibrancy that people are showing with the limited stuff they have. Think about Roman. In now every language, everybody is sending you SMSs in their local language with English script. Okay, so people are doing the best they possibly can, but I think structures fundamentals are not there. So how then can it be inclusive? I also don't know where you measure all the stuff that comes from China. Today I find that a lot of lower income people, wherever you are 10 saris. I photograph saris at every lower income wedding, and I say how much does it cost. There are little fairyland shoes from China. There are, everybody's got diyas in their house that comes from China. So I don't even know where that number comes from.
So that's the consumption part. But now you are saying, because we know that there are some 63 or 65 or 70 million small, medium enterprises, of which 95% are actually small and micro. And your story now says that because thanks to platform economics and aggregators, these 95% or maybe 50, 60 million small producers will have access to now service those same consumers who are consuming Chinese goods. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that they will be able to even go up the value chain a little bit, not just the same consumers, but if you're making a small building material, if you are a small electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, you can actually make more money when you're attached to a platform. The platform will aggregate all of you and give you your goods cheaper so that the tools that you need come cheaper. So that's really what I'm saying. I'm saying that you will have a wider footprint and you will have more facilities than you have ever had before.
So we'll take some questions, Mr. Anand. Can we get the mic to Professor Anand? Can you give the mic? Yeah. Yes, Professor Anand.
I have one example which I want to get your comments on, which is not platform but has been enormously successful in FMCG area, which is Patanjali. And Patanjali has built up, so to speak, a successful business by essentially franchising in some form, but giving a label. So it's a traditional approach and it has been successful.
No, absolutely. I think Patanjali has been a wake-up call. We all thought the FMCG market was signed, sealed, delivered, stuck with 4 people. The speed with which market share went, I mean, Colgate at one point dropped 10 percentage points in just a year. So the Patanjali, the price performance was absolutely perfect. Now imagine Patanjali if it had survived long enough, and why it didn't is another set of reasons, but if they had survived long enough and been able to yoke all their retailers with the digital ecosystem, they would have gone even further, even deeper, and screwed everybody even further.
Mr. Raghav, yeah. Can you please give the mic to him?
Fantastic. Wonderful listening to you after a very long time. So now the point is, August Comte, right? Demography is destiny. Demography is destiny. What we are seeing very interestingly is that RBI data shows that the youth is running a lot of debt on credit cards. And now that we are at a very dynamic stage of a consumption, because that is what I was really looking forward to. You've done the cuts as per, occupations, cities, etc. What's your view on the demographic destiny of India?
Demographic destiny.
Every time I put out 2 kinds of data, I'm met with thundering silence. One is occupation data, because no one wants to see the fact that 1/3 of households are dependent on casual labor. The other is youth profile. Obviously, the large part of the youth are rural and poor. So, I mean, in fact, more so because urban India is actually having smaller family sizes, which is also a good thing because if our kids don't live with us, then, in America has more number of households per population than we do. So I think that that's good news. But most of the youth are that way. In fact, with a colleague here who's sitting here from IIT Madras, I've said to her that you're an anthropologist. Sit down and do an anthropological study for me and tell me what it is that they are thinking and feeling, because you don't have occupations as strongly as they are. I don't even know how many of them have skills, but yet they seem to do the best. I have never seen a more learnable group of people than our own account workers. So they're doing the best they can, but demography-wise, I mean, it mirrors the same income patterns that we've seen. It's not different. And the employment report of yesterday is also pretty much saying that. So I think the question is that how do you take the natural vibrancy that they have, and what can we do for them?
Hi, I've just come up because Ajit had to catch a flight. I think we have time enough to take up, say, 3 questions. Sudipto?
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation you gave us. One thing you just said in your comments now has triggered a thought in my mind. You said that these guys are going to make more money. This key that has opened up and it's really crash course and, in a sense, given access to the Prahlad black box that nobody had access to. But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, in fact, Uma Rani, she's been presenting stuff, the huge World Bank, ILO survey across the world, to use exactly since you talked about Uberization, I mean, these Uber drivers actually, a lot of them are not making more money. They're actually very miserable. They don't have a choice. So, in a sense, it's the new version of informal, labor being, sweated labor that's happening. So, I was just wondering what your thought is on that.
Actually, Uber is an interesting example because the model is not that you borrow money in order to buy a car to become an Uber driver. That was not the Uber model. That was the model we ended up using here. Now, banks in India are very good at lending in good times, and then they discover prudent credit when bad times. So I think they should not have lent the amount they lent, and it was like a Ponzi scheme that happened. So as much demand as there possibly is, that's all there is. So based on comfort letters from Uber, with no underwriting, a lot of banks lent to these people. I think that shouldn't have happened. Where was the regulator? So if you, on the other hand, look at the model where taxi companies who were small and struggling, or people who already owned their own cars, they're actually making money because they're getting onto the platform. Now that the platform is exploitative, et cetera, is a whole different thing, you know. Now, whether those are fair labor practices or not is, I think, is an issue that has to be looked at in terms of how you regulate without killing the goose that lays the golden egg. But the potential for a wider footprint is definitely there, and higher prices.
Kannan.
Very interesting lecture. But as economists, what you showed is broadly in line with the national statistics also, because much of the surplus income is in the first 10%, and then you have stretched it to another 20%, so 30 to 40%. And our consumer expenditure surveys, whatever they were earlier, say that 2/3 of the income is on food and food related. And if you go to the rural side, it's about 70%. So what is left of the income to spend for the kind of things that you are talking about? One can understand the socialization and all kinds of things, but largely in terms of volume, largely or value, more largely urban. So if you are speaking about urban India, urban surplus income, urban Uberization, I think this story goes very well. I find it very difficult to extend it to rural.
Actually, it works very well with rural as well. 2-3 points. I completely agree with you and that is what we struggle in business as well, to say that this is the reality of where it is. There is surplus income, but every time you drop price thresholds, because you have managed to get your costs in order, demand booms, as China has showed us. Go to any small rural town, and I will show you fancy party shoes for children that have come from China. It costs 40 rupees in Bombay. It costs 100 rupees by the time it's gone to Kotagiri or Chorai or whatever it is. But dropping price thresholds is clear. If somebody gets an Innova car, you will find that 6 people will get together, save up money. Once in a year, I will go from here to that Covil over there. So I think that the sharing economy, I think, is working. There is a product called Elastic Run. Elastic Run as a company, I mean, not a product. It's one of it was a unicorn, I think, and I don't know where it is now. So what they're basically doing is distributing goods below the nose of where large company distribution system works. And what they've done is they've Uberized the logistics, where they're telling people that you can come onto this platform and deliver for the last mile as often as you like or as less as you like. And that's what I'm going to take care of. So I think it's just the ability to be able to serve very, 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 very small parcels and make that happen. Because fundamentally, it's not that they don't want affordable indulgences. They do. Even if you're very poor, if ladki dekhne aa rahe hain, so you want a little bit of, house being painted. Now, if you look at, there are a lot of apps that are being constructed for that market, but obviously not as much. But the urban-rural divide, if I can be so bold as to say, I think has blurred. What is not blurred is the income levels. Again, if I've shown you where the mass market incomes lie, the same product can actually work in both places if you have a little bit of imagination to get it going.
Do you have statistics of consumer products by its, the share of each state?
States or pop strata?
So, well, to begin with states.
Yes, there is data. It depends on the consumer goods you have. If you're a company like Nestle that is largely targeting the higher end, then obviously you do better in the north, you do better in the west and the south. If you are Geo, you do well everywhere. Yeah. If you are Hindustan Lever, you do extremely well in UP now because that is the emerging place. Whereas the South has already become a it's what everybody's calling premiumization. It's value up. The South is basically saying, I want to stretch for more. I'm willing to pay a little more if I can get a lot more. And that's how I'm going to balance it. So I think, and a lot of consumer goods, half the market is in rural India.
Thank you. I think I'm going to have to limit it to one question. So Jimol and Nisha, you could choose between yourselves. The reason is that there's a dance performance in this auditorium at 7 p.m. and I can see the artists are coming in. I have a general body meeting to conduct after that. So
I know. No, my very short question. I had more, but I'll just ask one. And that is, what is your opinion on, this large number of HNIs, high net worth individuals, going abroad and settling abroad? Indian business and Indian listeners are doing pretty well.
Jimol,
I think I'll just ask.
Quick question, and that's...
yeah, I think, Rama, of course, fascinating, and your language is fascinating, particularly for us, who has a very staid kind of language. So your thing is that the rich business should stop looking at 20 and 20% top, and the lower down also can be looked at. But small businesses also get the advantages through the platforms because they obviously larger markets and lower operation costs and so on and so forth. But the Uberization people, the ILO and so on, will argue that ultimately those platforms, when they may begin small, and the advantages are large, but then they have the algorithmic controls so that over time the squeeze on the small businesses also increases. So what is it in there for the small businesses then?
To your question, it's a free country, I guess, and we all decide where we want to live, and I know that there are lots of people who now have residencies everywhere except India, so that's, there are an equal number of us who've chosen to be here and who have a stake in it because our children are here. So I guess that's the thing. But Jimol, to your point, yes, I think that's why, in fact, Deepak has been saying that at IHD that we have to promote a little more discussion on both sides, because until I went to the other panel, it did not necessarily, I'm ashamed to admit it, occur to me that, it may have occurred to me, but at the back of my mind, that you actually seriously need to start looking at how you are going to stop exploitative practices. Because in industry, we say regulation's very good, we love it, it's great, but on the other hand, we're usually regulator bashing. So that's really where we are. So yes, I think that we need to hear more about how to have practices that make sense. And it is the question, isn't it, that how far do you trust the market to take care of it, to take care of things? I mean, I think we're saying that as a market instrument, it's working very well. What's in it for small businesses? And small businesses are also very smart. So at one point when a big telco said that I'm going to get all the kiranas together under a single label, most kiranas said, why on earth would I join you when you're taking away my custom and taking away my identity? But on the other hand, if you manage to get it right and the dharma of business is to add value to someone and extract value from them. So if you get that dharma right, you're fine. If you're not adding value and you want to extract, the market is supposed to kick you in the teeth. Where regulation kicks in and how long is this period of time before the ideal world happens is something I'm always humbled when I come to forums like this, because it makes me think differently. And that's why I think we should have more dialogue, and you've been saying this for a while.
Well, on behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank Rama very much for what has been a fascinating lecture. And may I add, and I have maintained this for some time, that we have much to learn from each other. In many ways, the story you told today connects with the story I wrote in the late 70s about why demand is a constraint on growth in India. And there are many analogs in these stories. So thank you very much again. And I think it's good for social scientists, all of us as economists and social scientists, to have these conversations with people who see the same world from the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this, your very insightful lecture, and thank you, everyone. Now this brings us to the end of this session. I request all the ISLE Life members and the annual members who have been annual members continuously for 2 years to kindly join the ISLE General Body Meeting, which will take place in the Zakir Hussain Lecture Hall Complex in room number G9. And very shortly, we will also have the cultural program by Ms. Yamini Reddy. Thank you very much.